Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast, where we explore the exciting science behind heart rate variability. The material discussed in this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. Please check with your medical provider to make sure any suggestions or strategies are right for you. Visit us at the optimalhrv.com website to learn more about the Optimal HRV app, download a free copy of Matt's book, Heart Rate Variability, and also get show notes and additional resources around heart rate variability and its applications. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am Matt, back here today with my good friend, Dr. Ina Khazan. Ina, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well, Matt. Thank you.
Awesome.
It's always good to see you.
Yes, good to have you back on the show. I know our ratings always get a little bump when you're on. So you are the star of the show. So it's great to have you back. And really some exciting news that we wanted to turn into a podcast today. So our tech developers for the Optimal HRV app have been working really hard on some updates. And one of the updates surrounds the idea of really separating the data out a little bit and really focusing on morning readings. And I want to kind of set this up and then, Ina, bring you in to talk about really why this is important. So currently, and what you see with most apps is you can take in a heart rate variability reading, or you've got some of the 24/7 monitors that just sort of take an HRV reading sometime during the night. That's sort of the two approaches where you can trigger a reading or that it automatically gets generated for you. And I know that there's some flexibility within those two, depending on what platform you're in. And there's benefits to each of those. I think we would both agree. One is that if something takes it for you automatically, you won't forget to take your reading. So that's always a good thing. I think I've been in a habit now of taking one every morning that it's just so ingrained in my routine. But there are some benefits too of triggering that reading. And so to this point, and we won't make this just about the heart rate, the Optimal HRV app, but to this point, we've been the trigger a reading anytime you want, and then you can tag your morning readings, and then you can kind of search by that tag to see what your morning reading average was. However, in our discussions, we thought it was really, the morning readings were so important that we really wanted to create a structure within the app that really automatically tagged that for you if you selected that option. And even more importantly, present that data separately than your collective. So any HRV score you take any time of day, to keep that as a separate entity. And so we're excited to announce that is now live within the app. And I want to thank both Ben Riley and Viv for all their hard work to get this done, to get this in. So I'm really excited about this one because I feel like I'm so protective of my morning reading average that I almost never take HRV readings outside my morning readings because I feel like it dilutes the data a little bit. So for me personally, this is a huge improvement. But let me throw it out to you. When we talk about consistency in establishing a baseline number, I want to kind of throw that out to you. Why is that consistency in establishing a baseline that we can measure improvements over time so important?
Well, the answer is because we want to be able to measure improvements over time, and we want to measure that progress and that improvement against something reliable, against something that where we minimize distractions and potential influences on that number. We want to get that number as accurately as possible. And so keeping your baseline readings for about the same time each morning is really important, and taking those readings as soon as possible when you wake up in order to minimize life influencing your readings. Your HRV scores tend to be highest in the morning. Your HRV does operate on a circadian rhythm, so HRV tends to be highest in the morning, both because of the circadian rhythm and because nothing much has happened yet. So you're going to get the most pure reading, for lack of a better term, in the morning before you start going about your day. And because each day is different and so many different things can come at you and influence your HRV, taking the reading at the same time each morning, as close to the time that you wake up, is really important, because that's going to give you the best estimate of your overall heart rate variability. And taking those readings, I would say 5 to 7 days in a row is going to be your best bet. And after that, if you skip a day or two in measuring your HRV, it's okay. I would not recommend skipping any days when you're establishing that baseline, so you can get as consistent a measurement as possible. And then as you go, of course, taking a daily reading is a really, really good idea. But if you have to skip a day or two after that 7-day baseline, it's not going to be that big a deal.
Yeah, and I love this, where we're at with heart rate variability. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because it's just something that still gives me goosebumps of what the technology has evolved into so pretty rapidly. When you look at the history of heart rate variability being around from the 60s, is I just find it fascinating that you look at all these peer-reviewed journal articles over these decades, and heart rate variability has really risen to be a gold standard of the stress response, of almost, I always like to use a mindfulness experiment. Is you come into a laboratory setting, you get a baseline heart rate variability reading, one group practices mindfulness, the other watches a funny video, or maybe not even a funny video, a bland video as a control group. Both of them stick their hands in a bucket of ice water to create the stress response. And then they take a post-test HRV reading. And most of, I would say probably 90% of the studies I have seen coming out of journals historically has been kind of some form of that. And I just kind of wonder, as I know you've been working with heart rate variability much longer than I have, is what are the benefits now that, of a 5-day, or a 1-week baseline versus kind of how historically we have looked at this to measure the stress response?
Heart rate variability is still obviously a really good indication of the stress response. It's a good indication of our resilience, of our adaptability, absolutely. But ultimately, HRV is an indicator of our ability to self-regulate at any time, which translates, of course, into times of stress. It also translates into times of relaxation and recovery, just, all the time. And research at this point is quite consistent that HRV is probably the best measurement we have, the best way to assess our self-regulation, resilience, adaptability, et cetera. So what we are doing in that 5 to 7 day baseline is establishing a measurement of where we are in our ability to self-regulate and respond to life in healthy ways. So that when we start making changes, whether it be through HRV biofeedback or through self-compassion practice or both, or through taking better care of ourselves, through better nutrition, better sleep, exercise, etc., we know exactly where we're starting, so that the marker of progress is an accurate one. Right, because going back for a second to your first question here as well, imagine if you take only a 1-day baseline. You just take your reading 1 day, and that's the day when you slept particularly terribly, and maybe also just had a really stressful day the day before and slept badly, so your HRV is going to be really, really low that day. And then you start making changes, and lo and behold, your HRV jumps up. but did it jump up because of this, what you're doing? Or is it because you haven't had those really stressful days with really poor sleep? You're not going to be able to tell. Or on the other hand, if generally maybe you don't sleep so well and things have been generally pretty stressful, but the one day you take your HRV reading is the day you slept really, really well. And the day before was just unusually relaxing for you, that your HRV number is going to be quite a bit higher than it is typically. And then you go back to your regular life and maybe not sleep as well and feel more stressed. But you start implementing some of the changes that you're thinking about, whether it be again HRV biofeedback or self-compassion or exercise or whatever. And then, as a result, you're actually seeing your HRV dropping. Mm-hmm. Right. And of course, that's going to feel awfully discouraging, but it's not happening because you're doing something wrong. It's happening because your initial reading was unusually high. And that's not what your HRV is actually. So if you take that 5 to 7 day baseline, those fluctuations that can happen randomly day to day are going to get diluted, for lack of a better word, because you're going to get an average of the 5 to 7 days, and it's going to be a lot closer to where you actually are. And it's going to give you a good estimate of your ability to self-regulate, yes. Which will then also tell you something about how are you able to respond to stress? How are you able to recover? How are you able to adjust to the changes that happen day to day, which is what HRV ultimately tells us about.
Yeah, and what I love about even so I love week gives you a really good solid, and that's what I've seen in any publications as well, is boy, that getting those first 5 to 7 readings is a really, like I said, if you think about how traditional studies have been done, really gives you a good idea. And then what I love is as you keep going, you sort of fine tune that. I always like in this sort of the mental health arena, we talk about states and traits. And, an individual reading will talk to you about how are you doing right now of regulation, right? And that's what is your state right now. And that's what the reading tells you. So what is your state this morning? For me, it really tells me, I always like to think about when my productivity and creativity crash is going to be. If my heart rate variability is high, it's probably 4:30 or 5. If it's low, it's probably around 2:30. Now, it doesn't mean that I pass out at 2:30. It means it's time to go do some QuickBooks or do some stuff that doesn't really require a whole lot of prefrontal cortex functioning. And then, what I love, and this is where I think the morning reading improvement to the app is going to be such a huge benefit to our users, is really looking at, okay, over time, is my, if I could, and correct me if I'm wrong, is my trait of self-regulation improving? So when I look at my 30-day averages, when I start to look at my all-time averages, then you really can see that marked improvement, which is really why I think most people are drawn to heart rate variability, because am I seeing an increase in heart rate variability over time?
Absolutely. That is such a good point. And I think you can absolutely make that, trait state distinction here. Any one individual reading probably can tell you, the difference between trait and state, right, because each individual reading is really a state. Yeah. But when you take, a week's or month's, a year's worth of HRV readings, that does tell you a whole lot about your general ability to self-regulate, way more of a trait statement rather than state. And then the ability to also take anytime reading is amazing, because you don't dilute that state data. You don't dilute the trait data that you have. But if you're curious, well, how did my meditation practice that I, influence my readings? Let me take a reading and see. Or, I'm just feeling really crummy today. I wonder what's going on. Let's take my HRV reading now. You're just curious about how different events in your life are influencing your HRV. That's what the anytime reading is for. It will give you valuable information. You might be wondering, well, am I have a choice to go for a really intense workout right now, or maybe I should take it easy. Let's take a look at my HRV. It will tell me something. Sometimes you just know. Sometimes you know you're ready for an intense workout and you don't need anything to tell you, but other times you're not so sure. And an HRV reading can tell you a whole lot about what's going on in your nervous system right now. Is it a good idea to give yourself more of a challenge, whether it be physical challenge with a workout or an emotional challenge, by having a tough conversation with your spouse that you've been putting off? It's now a good time for it, or should you continue putting it off? Sometimes just give you an excuse. All right, my HRV is not quite there. I'm kidding. I don't want you to use it as an excuse, but it does give you an idea of what your body is ready for.
Well, it's such a great point too, because the struggle that I think I was running into, and I think again with tags you get that information, but I think if we're honest, it's what's on the home screen is what we focus the most attention on. And that's where like that really excitement is. Yeah, you can still tag things. We actually cleaned up the tagging. We'll clean up, maybe just organized it a little bit differently. We're working on even better tagging options coming up, which is really exciting, but you can still get really specific. But then, I think post testing a biofeedback session or an exercise session or whatever it might be, it just allows you to kind of have this whole collective of HRV data, play around with it as much as you want. Well, you've got this separate morning reading category that really allows you to track trait improvement over time. So you sort of, in many ways, on one screen, get the best of both worlds. And I think a lot of us are, how are those numbers going to vary? I know when I take some evening scores, they're much lower, as they should be, than morning scores, on most days. So it's, it just allows, again, that flexibility, and to ask a different kind of set of questions with the answer being right on the home screen, which I know most of us don't want to click 3 or 4 times to find that information, even unless we're really interested in it. So that's another really exciting thing I see of this.
Absolutely. The easier we can access something, the more likely we are to make use of it. So that's just human nature.
And I would assume you agree with me too, is we played around with the term morning reading because we know there's shift workers and all kinds of different things. And I really think, if you're starting to look at that morning reading in the app, when you get up, I think that we agree it's like when you wake up from your biggest rest, your sleep, so to speak, that is the time. I think shift work is a whole different podcast with heart rate variability, but really just when you wake up from whatever that restful sleep, whether that's 3 a.m. to start your shift, whether that's 8 a.m., whether that's 3 p.m., that's the time we want to really capture.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's, when someone is working shifts, it's a much more nuanced issue that we should talk about at a different time. Yes. If your morning is consistently at a different time, let's say you always work nights, so you wake up always in the afternoon. Versus if sometimes you work nights and other times you work days and then you work afternoons, so your sleep is changing. That becomes a little bit more difficult. I do think that your rule of thumb, just whenever you wake up from your biggest rest of the 24 hours, that makes sense. It's important to keep in mind that the circadian rhythm is still going to play a role there, and shift work influences not only your HRV but also your circadian rhythm. So it becomes more complicated. But gotta simplify it somehow. So sticking with waking up from your rest for the 24 hours makes sense.
Yeah, I'd also like to touch on, because this is one of the biggest questions you hear around heart rate variability is, well, I took it when I woke up, then I went to the bathroom, I came back, I took it again, and it was vastly different. And so as we think about morning readings, I think consistency of time is one of those things. And by the way, just a reminder, in our app, you can set a alarm to remind you to take your reading, which if you're new and you haven't done 1,000 readings like Ina and I have, really good to help you get into that habit is set it a minute or so or right at your alarm so they go off at the same time. when we think about, consistency, before or after bathroom, maybe the position that you're in, I think one of the minuses of not going into a laboratory to take an HRV reading is that the clinician in the laboratory can get you to sit in the same way for pre-post test readings, can control those variables. Can you just talk a little bit about, even if we get in the realm of that, I'm going to take it relatively when I get up, just the importance of consistency in getting accurate HRV scores over time?
Yeah, a really, really good point. As far as whether you should take the reading, before or after you go to the bathroom, I think, it's a decision you should make. If when you're waking up, if you're comfortable, if you don't need to, rush off to the bathroom, I would probably say just take your reading then. Again, in order to minimize stuff getting in the way. If you typically, you're just much more comfortable if you wake up, go to the bathroom and come back, obviously that's fine. But I would say, then get yourself into your reading position, kind of comfortable, reclining or upright position, and let yourself settle for a minute. Because even kind of movement, especially if you're kind of rushing around in the morning, going to the bathroom, I gotta get my reading done. Let yourself settle, because your reading is not going to be very accurate if you've just been rushing and running around, which is why my suggestion is to, if possible, take your reading before you do anything at all. And do make sure that the position in which you take your reading is consistent. I don't think it really matters which position it is, as long as it's the same one for you every time. A reclining or sitting upright position is likely going to be your best bet. And even more importantly, make sure that whatever appendage your device is attached to, whether it be your finger or your ear or your forearm, depending on the device you're using, make sure you're not moving that part of the body. Now, you don't have to be rigidly still. That can actually create some other problems, but so that part of the body is resting comfortably and not moving during the 3-minute reading. So position yourself in such a way that, if your HRV reader is on your arm somewhere, finger, forearm, doesn't matter, make sure that the arm is resting comfortably, so that there is no need to move it, and there is less chance of an accidental movement during the reading, because that's when artifacts happen. Movement is the most likely reason for artifact in an HRV reading, and then you get an unrealistic or inaccurate picture.
Yeah, and I think like the just that consistency too of and maybe there's another one out there, I'm not, but I think about state changes. In other words, when do we change our states, whether emotional, physical? And I think that waking up to sleep to wake. I've really been focused. This is a sidetrack, and I don't expect you to answer it, but I'm really interested on my data of whether I wake up naturally or if I wake up to an alarm. I really am seeing, interesting enough, because I'm getting a little less sleep and sometimes significantly less sleep, like 45 minutes less. But when I wake up naturally, my heart rate variability scores are much higher than if the alarm wakes me up, which is a little counterintuitive because I'm getting technically less sleep, even though that's not a hard data point to look at, because I might have gone to sleep earlier or whatever. But I'm very interested, like, in that sleep to wake transition, and if the alarm does it, is that sort of a stressor that shows up in my heart rate variability scores? It's just kind of one of those fascinating things after taking years of readings. It's like, like this is very interesting to see this. And then obviously standing up when you've been lying down, standing up is a huge state change. Like your body is adjusting to gravity after laying down. So like I said, just that time to sit and adjust. If you are going to get up, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, just give yourself that chance to kind of adapt, fall back into laying down or sitting up and take it from there, I think is great advice. So And then
Yeah.
maybe we can get some research money to see alarm versus natural wake state. So I've just been fascinated by the difference that I'm seeing, that almost I wake up a half hour earlier, my heart rate variability is much higher than if I sleep to the alarm, which
I don't think a study like that has been done, although, it's entirely possible it's escaped my attention, but this would be a great study. And, it kind of makes sense, right? If you're waking up naturally, unless something other than the alarm wakes you up,
right.
like a, neighbor's dog or a crying baby or something, but assuming that you actually woke up
No.
naturally, I imagine that happens when your body is ready to wake up, and it's in a state of being ready to start the day, and you woke up from a proper sleep stage, one where you're ready to be awake and get going, as opposed to the alarm doesn't know what sleep stage you're in, right? Or if you've gotten enough sleep, and the alarm just goes off. So not only is the alarm potentially startling, but it may be interrupting your sleep, at less than ideal time. So it certainly makes sense to me that waking up naturally would produce higher HRV numbers, but that study would be really valuable if somebody wants to do
So
it.
I don't know how you would do that, but hey, if somebody's sitting on $1 million of research funds out there, we'd be happy to figure that out. So I've got, I think, an easy question for you, and I got a question that might not have an answer, which I typically have to throw out a few of those anytime I have you. So here's sort of I think what will probably be the easy one. Now that we can really help people focus on the morning readings and every time readings. Obviously, morning readings, consistency of position, consistency of before getting up, going to the bathroom, or after. The more consistent you can be, the more accurate you're going to be. But over time, you're really getting great data regardless. But again, consistency. Let's say you take a post biofeedback training reading, let's say at 5 p.m. after an afternoon session. Let's say I take my morning reading laying down, should I think about all my readings keeping that constant positioning, or does it matter as much as we measure kind of things throughout the day?
And I think in general, whatever is under your control, keeping it as consistent as possible when it comes to HRV readings. So I would say, as far as the position goes, why not take it in the same position, or approximately the same position? The not moving, the part of the body where the device is attached, is always incredibly important, because artifact is going to be a problem any time of the day. You are not very likely to be directly comparing your post biofeedback readings with your morning readings, although there's definitely going to be that temptation. But how valid that comparison is questionable, right? Because so many things have happened, from circadian rhythms to stuff happened during the day to the fact that you just did a biofeedback reading, and it's hard to say, well, you just did your 20 minutes of training and your HRV is a little lower than it was in the morning. Does it mean you screwed up your biofeedback training? No, not likely. It maybe just means that your day has been a little bit more stressful. And the fact that you've done your biofeedback reading is very much a good thing. It means you needed it. Right. So just be careful not to do too much direct comparison between anytime reading and your morning reading. But you can certainly do some comparisons of post biofeedback readings, from day to day. And for that matter, you do want to keep your reading position consistent. So whatever you can keep consistent, I think there's always going to be a benefit to that.
Awesome. Okay, maybe one of those questions only probably Matt can come up with probably, I don't know if you've seen anything on this as well, but when I have seen research on circadian rhythms, I believe what I see pretty consistently in the research is that cortisol spikes in the morning. I think purpose-wise to get your butt out of bed. It kind of gives you that early energy. but it kind of seems counterintuitive to some extent that I'm having a cortisol spike while during the time of day that I'm probably seeing the highest heart rate variability. I wouldn't put those two things together in most situations. So is there something special going on there? Is it like, did you have you seen any? I just can't. I'm trying to bring those two pieces of research together, and they just seem to be counteracting each other. And I wonder if you had any thoughts of what's sort of going on, where we might see, if somebody did a cortisol draw, that we might see high levels of cortisol with a high heart rate variability of score, where you normally probably wouldn't see those two things correlated.
Yeah, so
I told you I had a hard one for you.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I'll probably need to do a little more digging around in the cortisol literature to answer this better. But let me give it a shot. Your cortisol does start rising in the morning to get your butt out of bed. It doesn't necessarily mean it's getting high. It's higher than when you're sleeping.
Okay.
It's increasing. Doesn't necessarily mean it's high. And cortisol is a tricky hormone in a sense that we certainly don't want to have too little of it, then we're in trouble. We don't want to have too much of it, we're in a different kind of trouble. Your cortisol has to be sort of at just the right level in order for us to be at our optimal state, just like HRV, is an indicator of being at an optimal state. So higher HRV means we're at an optimal state, right? So I think, cortisol rising in the morning is normal, natural, means you're preparing to be at your best for the day. And cortisol is also released together with a hormone called DHEA, which is also a stress hormone. And those two need to be present in appropriate in an appropriate ratio to one another. You don't want too much cortisol and not enough DHEA, because that means you're overly stressed, right? Because DHEA is sort of like a supportive stress hormone, right? Cortisol is more of a get out of danger hormone when it spikes, but you need to have an appropriate dose of the two. And DHEA tends to correlate nicely with heart rate variability as well. So I think that's the best I can do for now. It's a really, really good question, and it's just not that simple. Cortisol is something that is going to fluctuate throughout the day, and that's not a bad thing at all. Cortisol increasing at the same time as your HRV is highest doesn't mean it's bad, just means your body is entering, or at least potentially entering, a desirable state.
Would it be maybe a little bit overset? By the way, you knocked that tough question out of the park, my friend. So yeah, I thought I might have thrown you a good pitch, but boy, nice swing. So is it, in some ways, maybe that cortisol? Boy, I want to be very careful with my language here. Almost helping us transition from a parasympathetic dominant state of sleep to a balanced state of wakeness. Would that be probably a little oversimplified, but is that maybe something what we're seeing is we're very, in many ways, I would say parasympathetic, we're very vulnerable, at least in sleep state. And then obviously wake state, there's a different energy clicking in. So maybe helping with that transition, or am I really oversimplifying it there?
No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, when you're sleeping, there is not a lot of activity going on, although when you're dreaming, there is, more activation, right? During REM sleep, there is a bit more activation going on compared to when you're in deep sleep, and there's very little activation going on at all. I think this has to do with the transition from sleep, very little activation, to the kind of activation you need in order to be at your best during the day. And your HRV coming off of a good night's sleep is going to be high, right? So as your cortisol starts rising, I don't think they're necessarily counter to each other. This may be why HRV will start decreasing during the day as your cortisol levels perhaps rise, and perhaps rise a little bit too much if there is too much stress, coming at you during the day. But I think that initial rise is not at all kind of counter to a higher HRV.
Awesome. Well, and I would just really encourage folks, play around with this. I think I've never been a good sleeper. From the first memories I've had, it's almost struggling to go to sleep. So what the morning readings have really done for me, and I think our users will see this if they haven't already, is to really like what evening activities lead to a restorative sleep with a high score the next day. I've been playing around with like, when do I take my supplements? When do I have my last calorie? I've shared with the podcast, not consuming alcohol. I find really great for sleep quality, even though I wish that wasn't my conclusion a lot of times. But just looking at, do I take a supplement in the evenings versus in the morning, and just those little things that you can kind of play around with. Sleep consistency. I went to, I don't go to many concerts anymore because they all start after 9:30, which is usually when I'm in bed. But I went to a concert the other week, and boy, my post-concert score was not, and I behaved pretty well, and still I woke up, it's like, oh, this is not, there's a cost to that. Now, it was a really good concert, so it was worth it, but you can really start to fine tune, especially for us not perfect sleepers out there, really what habits in the evening are going to allow you to wake up, and then your sleeping habits. A weighted blanket has been great for my sleep quality. That cool room has been spectacular. Kicking my dog out of the bed has been nice, even though he sometimes whines in the middle of the night, which is not good for my heart rate variability. But it gives us that really nice information to say, okay, I've got data to show shifting this supplement to the evening. It seems to be having a positive trend on my morning heart rate variability. And again, then playing out to give me fuel throughout the day has been really cool. So
HRV is an awesome way to put data to your personal experiments.
amazing.
You just got to make one change at a time so
Yep.
that you know what it is you're measuring. First, to make this as scientific as possible. But absolutely, HRV is a really great way to quantify all sorts of things that up until recently were actually really hard to assess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you. I know we have been, I've Viv and Ben out there. I want to give our tech folks a lot of props. It seems like from a non-technical perspective, it'd be really easy to have made this change. I've learned a lot about things called API and other things over the last few months. So I want to give them a lot of credit for this. And, just thank you. As a partner in this journey, your ideas have been just, invaluable for building this. And we've got some more exciting news coming up soon, which I'm really excited to share around the biofeedback improvements as well. So I'm going to hold on to that, delay gratification a little bit until we can really have our users kind of go through that with us. But really great stuff coming on board too. So Ina, as always, thank you so much for your work and just value our partnership. And everybody go to optimalhrv.com. You can find show notes for this episode. I believe actually, and you may have heard this before, though we're recording this ahead of this, we're giving away Ina, Dave, and I's a book, The Heartbeat of Business. If you go to Optimal HRV, Optimal Innovation Group.org, it's our nonprofit site. So optimalinnovationgroup.org. We'll also put that in the show notes. You can download a free digital copy of The Heartbeat of Business. So we know there's a lot of people struggling with burnout right now. I see that everywhere I go. And so we look at that in that book, both from an individual and a group, team, organizational perspective. So we thought entering the new year would be a great time to get that resource out to folks. So go do that. Ina, again, thank you so much. Always love having you on the show.
Thank you, Matt. It's always a pleasure.
Take care, everybody.